All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. For this conversation, I'm excited to welcome back one of the earliest guests I had on this podcast, not only a frequent collaborator of mine, but of course a dear friend. It's my great pleasure, as always, to welcome Mr. Roger Ebner. Roger, good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too, Joel. Good to be here again. Glad you're alive.
I'm
Me
glad
too.
everybody's alive for the most part. Well, I can't really say everybody these days. It seems like every day I go on Facebook, it's like reading
Yeah,
a goddamn obituary.
right.
But, that such as it is, can't control that. All we can control is the present. And
Yeah,
fortunately, my present is being spent with you, my friend. And, you know,
mutually.
right before we started, I was thinking, it's been almost 9 years since you and I first met at Pigface 25.
Has it been that long?
It has.
Wow, 9 years, almost a decade.
Yeah, crazy, crazy.
Yeah, really.
A lot of life and a lot of music went through
Yeah,
9 years.
definitely, man. A
Yeah,
lot of fun and,
absolutely.
and more to come.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to have you back because, we did the initial interview back in 2023 when I first started doing this channel. And we covered a lot of your previous history in that conversation. And of
Right
course,
on.
I'll link that interview in the video description for this one. But I wanted to bring you back to talk about your more current activities, namely the fact that just in the last few weeks, you have put out, in my opinion, your finest work,
Oh,
a
thank you, man.
fantastic EP called Ebner, which right behind you is the backdrop. It's stylized EBNR. It's a new EP that's been self-released. There's also a review of it on my website, which I'll also link to this video description.
Outstanding. Hats off to Jim Marcus for help with all the artwork.
Absolutely, that's very much a Jim
Amazing.
Marcus creation. You can tell
Yeah,
that from a mile away.
yeah, it's his style. He's great to work with. Anybody need any artwork, give Jim a call.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And funny enough, I've been in touch with Jim more recently than I have in a very long time, oddly enough. And uh always
well,
good to see him doing his thing and very creative guy. Super
yeah, absolutely. And Di Warza was musicianship was just fantastic.
right.
And I got a taste of just how good it was, when doing that tribute record with Ilker Regen.
Right.
Yeah, we did. We came in and we did Crusader,
Mm,
and it was a little intimidating, um, going. There was a sax solo near the end of the song, and it's a real long sax solo, and it's Mars Williams
mm.
playing it. Mars played with the Furs, and he passed a year or two ago, something like that.
Yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah, so here I am, trying to play saxophone my style, but at the same level with influence, but not copying, Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a trick. It wasn't a trick. It was a lot of hard work, but and a lot of love went into it. Absolutely.
And deservedly so with respect to Mars. Mars was a much beloved musician and presence
Oh,
in
he was incredible.
I just did an interview recently with a gentleman named Knox Chandler, who was in the Psychedelic Furs as well as Susie and the Banshees, and he was a longtime friend and bandmate of Mars. So we got into that a bit in that conversation. So anyone watching this video, I suspect there will be a few who knew Mars or knew of Mars. Um, I'm going to link that interview as well in this because towards the end we get into a bit about Mars and
That would be cool because I only met him a couple times. I wasn't here on the scene when he was doing a lot of jam band. I forget the name of the band that he had, but he played at a club here in Chicago and it became quite famous.
Mm.
on the Chicago scene. And I think that's how he got picked up by the Furs. Just people noticed what he was doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, great player. You know, talked to him a couple times, but wish I would have been able to hang out with him longer. You really get to know him. It would have been nice.
Yeah, that's always the problem when there's such a wide world of musicians that we all sort of intersect with is you try to grasp the moment whenever you possibly can, whether you're playing with someone on stage or conversing with them at a show, because time is always fleeting and never
Oh
anyone's
yeah,
friend, so
yeah. You
you know.
never know what's going to happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. But on a positive note, I did want to dive into this
Oh yes,
you. And as I said, it's my favorite work of yours so far. I
thanks,
think
man.
I say that every time I hear something new from you. It's always the best thing. So I'll say that first and foremost. And one of the reasons why I appreciate your work so much is you're always in a state of evolution. And you've always been incredibly kind in sending me your works in progress and updating me on what you're doing. And
You've been kind to listen.
well, when I get that call or that text or that email, I know I don't really know what I'm going to get because it can go in whatever direction you're feeling you want to go in. But I know it's going to be interesting because I know at the very least it's not going to be what I've already heard from you. And I look for that in artists who take things somewhere else, There are certain artists that are great at what they do, and they just keep doing that. And sometimes that works well, but in a lot of cases, I like to hear what the next step is going to be. And you're always taking those next steps. So it's always interesting for me to take in what you're doing because I know it's going to be whatever comes next, you know. It's not just another Roger Ebner EP. It's going to take me somewhere you've never taken me before. That's why I always
Why would I go back to the same place?
right.
I mean, it's more fun to explore different things, and music is so vast. I love indigenous music. Like what's the name of the band? It's a Mongolian band. They're called the Who.
Mm, hmm.
They're playing indigenous instruments to heavy metal rock,
Right.
and it just kicks ass, with that kind of rhythm. And that's kind of the common theme that you'll find, but it can be applicable in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do here is kind of break down this current EP and give people who haven't experienced it yet an idea of what they will expect from it. And I'll include the link, obviously, for people to go get it and check it out and listen to it.
Cool.
You have a lot of great collaborators as well, some of whom have also been on this channel over time. So I figure we'll kind of go track by track and kind of break it down that way and talk about the creative process and how you went from point A to point B in these cases.
Okay, cool.
And the EP opens with a track called Break It Up, um, which is a fantastic way to open this EP, because one of the things that strikes me right off the bat is you have vocals on this track, which you don't always have in your material, but in this case you had Bessie Mink. Um,
Yeah, she was amazing.
and I know Vessie's been kind of in your orbit for quite a while now. How did the two of you first connect?
Well, back around 20, it was right after the Pigface show. I read an article in one of the Chicago Underground mags that Chris Wozniak had written, and I contacted him. We talked for a bit, and we actually it developed into a uh, uh, very tight friendship for a number of years. And we he knew Vesey from years ago. He met her out in California, um, and we were just doing the beginnings of Aeronova Rhythm Collective. We had a few songs going, and we brought Vesey, and the three of us became the founding members of ARC. So that's how I met Vesey. You can go out to think a lot of his songs are kind of semi demos. Some are finished, and some are really good demos. And it's Aranova Rhythm Collective .bandcamp.com. There's a Bandcamp page for it, and you can listen to a lot of the stuff. So it was a very free um, environment. Chris would create tunes. He and I would collaborate on tunes together. Bessie, the three of us would get together and collaborate, just come up with ideas. And it was very prolific. And it kind of came to a deadly halt a couple years ago when he passed.
Mm.
So, here's to Chris. He was one of the best, one of the craziest. He did H-Gun, back in the day.
Right.
And I think, but I'm not sure. I don't know for sure. But it sounds like something that he would think up.
Mm.
Tying the camera to a weather balloon to get an aerial shot, but not realizing how strong those balloons are. So, the history's out there. You go, you go check it out. But I think he was in the middle of that whole thing. So, I don't know. The guy's fucking crazy, man. But love him and very creative and very supportive. So we had a lot of fun. And it's taken a while to get over what happened. I mean, to mourn the loss. And Bessie and I kind of went our separate directions for about a year and a half, and we're starting to get together and work together some more. So I'm very happy about that.
Excellent. Excellent. And you have someone on that track as well who's been part of your history for even longer than the Pigface, 2016 forward era. And that's William Kopecky. You two go back a long time, right?
Yeah, we go back to early 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. I think that's when we met. And we created a band called Yeti Rain, and we created another spin-off. Yeti Rain was started out with the duo bass and sax, and I think I was playing just bass and wind synth for the first record. Second record, I pulled sax in, and third record, we pulled a very talented drummer in. His name is Craig Wagner,
Hmm.
and we did a few radio shows. And most of the stuff we did though was studio, and then we recorded four records that are released. Uh, two or three are internationals. They're up at uh, Unicorn Digital out of Montreal. I'm not sure if they're still around, if they survived, but they do a lot of progressive rock and they do some strange, dark ambient music as well, and we kind of fit into that category. So yeah, I've been doing work with Bill for a long, long time, and I'm looking forward to going to Marseille and visiting him, and maybe something will come of it. So that's on the agenda over the next year or two.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah,
I know you have another frequent collaborator, and he comes on board beginning with the second track on the EP, which is The Writings on the Wall. Of course, I'm referring to Eric McWhorter. You and Eric McWhorter have, worked together for a long time now.
yeah. We did. Yeah, we absolutely did. And I met him at an early Pigface rehearsal where I think they were designed to check out the newcomers to the band to make sure everything was going to go smoothly at the final rehearsal. And I think Mike Reedy was initially called in. Steven Siebert uh, couldn't make it, so they needed an extra guitar player. And the call went to Mike, and Mike called Eric, Eric took the job without really knowing all the songs. And, you know, that was my first rehearsal. I walked in and set up my gear, and it was Curse and Dirk and Leanne, I think Levi, um, Martin, of course. A couple of his interns were running around giving everybody drinks, you know, bottled water and that kind of stuff. So, you know, we played the rehearsal, and I was kind of wondering about this guitar player. I didn't know he was called in to sub, you know, for Steven Seabold. And the rehearsal didn't go real well. Yeah, I think Eric was they acted like they were shut down, and then I don't know if we did another rehearsal without. But the next rehearsal I was at was with Steven, and from the point of the first rehearsal to the second one that we had, I learned all the music and got to the point where I was actually recognizing what they were working on. So, you know, that's when you stay quiet and play when you're asked, and you kind of don't get in the way of things, and just do your job. And, you know, you got to put the work in on top of it. But that's where I met Eric initially, was at that rehearsal. And the second time I saw him was at the end of the show at Reggie's during the Thanksgiving show.
Mhm.
He showed up. Well, he came down after when we were packing up, and he helped me load my gear out and all that. And we got to know each other a little bit better, and we just run into each other from time to time, and we became very good friends. And we've done a lot of work together and collaborated. And I joined kind of is a collaborative band that he and a couple of his friends created. It's called Motivican,
Mhm.
and the music there is a combination of punk, industrial, progressive rock, rock and roll, blues, pretty much any genre you want to throw at it. And we just kind of weave our way in and out through all that stuff. We have a lot of free improv in it, so that's a lot of fun for me to play with. I love playing with those guys. So Eric and I will be connected, I think, for a long time. It's a good thing.
Excellent. And you know, he certainly has had an extensive run in his own right
Oh
musically.
yeah,
You know, I mean, there were so many bands we got into when he was on the show. And of course, you know, well, I got to meet him initially at the Pigface 25 shows because he and Mike were in Worm.
right.
And we all met on the drum line at the House of Blues when there were like, what, nine drummers up there.
Something like that, yeah.
And it's like, oh, who are you?
Yeah,
Who are you? And that's how it all
yeah. I was
began.
just trying to make sure I didn't run into anybody and no one ran into me. You know, and we got the one picture from there where it's Bob Dog and myself and Jesse all in one shot, and it looks like we're far apart, but we're pretty close. Very, very cool.
Yeah, I almost fell off the back balcony during one of those songs. Um, because I
Hmm.
wasn't on the full kit at that point. I was on it for one of the songs, the one that Jimmy Marcus sang.
Right.
Then I bounced off, Leanne came back, and I was sort of like in the rear drum line next to the Worm guys. And then it was Godlike with NS
Oh, all
singing.
right.
And I went to kind of like step back to do like some dramatic drum thing. And I kept moving back because I had stepped off the edge of the balcony. So woo.
Oh, wow.
So I was this close, you know. I mean, it probably wasn't much of a fall, but you know, when you're not prepared to fall off a
Well, it's
balcony,
unstable, you know.
yeah, it
It's
feels like you're gonna fall 100 feet, you know, because you're not
right.
prepared for what's gonna come.
Well,
But
falling backwards is not advisable.
no, no, never is. Fortunately,
Not a good thing to happen.
you know, that didn't happen there, but you know, would have been just my luck to, you know, play a show of that size and totally eat shit off the back of the stage.
Yeah.
And
They're great.
Eric's kind of all over this EP because the next song on the release, Prelude to the Last Thing, Eric wrote, correct?
Yeah, that was really interesting. I was working on getting the album mastered at a local shop called well, I'll leave the name of the shop out. But there are some good friends that I've worked with for a long time here in Chicago. And the studio that this cat owns, he and his brother actually rescued a Steinway it's over 100 years old, and they rebuilt the piano and they put it into the studio and built a very specific room for it to sit in to get that all the piano sounds. And Eric is trained as a classical pianist first and foremost, and he was trying to work on his own stuff, but we had the speakers out in the live room blasting the song, and he just picked up the chord progression on the song that we were playing. That's the last thing is the name of the song, and he worked out a prelude to it. And so we finished the song. He stopped, and he came in, and he's very humble. He was kind of looking like he discovered something unique. And he said, I just wrote an intro to that song. And my initial reaction was, of course you did. And he said, I said, I'd like to hear it. So I'll go back to the room, and he starts playing the intro. And I said, sit right here, just stay here, keep working on it. I'll be right back. And went back and talked to the engineer, and I said the piano's got all these mics around it, and they look like they're ready to be used. How much of a problem would it be to record some piano? He said, it's all completely mic'd up. I just got to turn it on. I said, well, let's get Eric back in the room, tell him what we're going to do, and turn it on and you know, get some of what he's working on because I think it's really cool. And so we did a couple takes, and I think he wanted to do a third one. And the third one was it. And he may have done a fourth one after that, but the second or third one was it.
Mm.
And he comes back to the control room, and you could hear a pin drop. There were about 3 or 4 other people in the room at the time, and everybody was just really quiet. And I said, Eric, that's going on the record. And he goes, oh, thanks, man. Yeah, yeah, he was very appreciative. Gave me a hug, and it was just such a beautiful piece that came out of his heart that was influenced by the song. I told him I was going to call it Prelude to the Last Thing, and I sent it to Christoph, and we got some some things added, some background to it, but the piano itself is, the Steinway, over 100 years old. That was a good night.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned Christoph because I wanted to bring him up in that this is another release in your discography, certainly aided and abetted by Christoph's involvement.
He's my I can literally call him my producer.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
I mean they're my songs,
yeah,
uh, and he helps me turn them from good demos into radio ready songs, and he comes up with some really good ideas. We have worked together on my material, and we've also worked together on his material. And a lot of times he'll have me listen, and I'll take the time and listen to a lot of different formats, like here in the studio, in the car, down at the Maynot Studios, on a little Bose speaker, and and then make notes, and we come back and talk about it. And some he agrees, and some he doesn't, and some, it's a good iron sharpening iron. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Chris, full credit to him. Very creative person,
Oh
very
yeah,
smart guy.
yeah.
Bile is a crazy kind of act, and when I first met Chris, all those years ago through Pigface, my first impression was, I guess, I had met him initially, gosh, maybe almost a quarter century ago through Pigface at
Hmm.
this point, a long time.
Yeah,
And, it's like, who the hell is this guy? Because he's a little, whoa, he leaves an
yeah,
impression. He's kind of out there until you realize that, those gears are spinning in some very fascinating ways. And the guy
yeah.
is, I dare say, amongst the geniuses of this whole industrial music thing of ours. I mean, he's really one of the guys who's got one of the sharpest ears out,
Oh my God.
knows his stuff.
Getting my material past him is like the final litmus test.
Yeah.
If I make Christoph happy, we're good. And if he's not happy, we're gonna get good. But we have might have to make some adjustments.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it boils down. There's no rush. You know, take the time to really work on these songs. Some of these songs started like a Break It Up. The idea of that song started back in 2018,
Hmm.
and it went down a particular path, hit a brick wall, went up on the shelf, pulled it off, blew off the dust, went down another path, hit a brick wall. And went through that several times before we got it to where it is right now.
Yeah.
And it was Vesey that pushed it over the top.
You One thing I like about your releases as well, and this has been something that's developed over the years, is you have that great spirit of collaboration. And where it's like, let's bring in different people, which is very much a Chicago thing, right? I think I
Yeah,
joked when I had Reedy on here, the typical conversation in Chicago goes like, "Hi, nice to meet you." 45 minutes later, you're cool. Let's do something together.
right.
It's really that simple. But you've kind of zeroed in on what I would consider a nice core of collaborators who I think understand what you're going for, and they have their own strengths that they bring to it that help propel, these ideas into tangible.
Yeah, exactly. Christoph is one of those. Eric is one of those. There, I could make a list, and Vesey is definitely one. She comes in from a different angle,
Hmm.
and it's always good to have more angles.
I did want to mention Dan Milligan is on
Yep,
this.
Dan's been. I've been doing some work with the Joy Thieves,
Mhm.
which Dan started, and I think I did a remix for them. And when he released the remix, I found out I was an honorary member of the Joy Thieves. So that was cool. And I love Dan. He's very positive, and he writes really good music. We're working on an interesting approach. He just sent a bunch of short drum parts and said, "See what you come up with." So I asked him on the timeline. There's no real timeline on it. I was in the middle of trying to get my album released, and from about February, March to now, I picked up one of the songs and spent about an afternoon and got a demo together and sent it off to him, and we'll see what becomes of it.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
Um, One of my favorite tracks on the release would be Desert Water for sure.
Mm.
That's essentially yourself, Eric, and Christoph. playing on
Right.
that. Um, was that something that sort of came up as you were bouncing things around with these guys, or did you kind of go into it with an idea of where the song was going to go?
I started writing Desert Water with under a different title called Father
Mm,
back in about 2015. It just would get it off the shelf, work on it for a bit. You'd go back up on the shelf, and it just kind of slowly marinated and worked over the years. And then my dad passed away. This was about 3 years ago, and um, I repurposed the song. It was actually what I'm talking about is Blue and Yellow. Desert Water. We'll get into Blue and Yellow later. So I mixed the two up because there are two of the songs that don't have vocals
right.
on the record. If you include the prelude, there are three. But um, so Desert Water, I wrote the basic outline of the whole track in my studio here. I uh, sent it off to this was during the pandemic, and sent it off to Eric, and he edited his bass part and sent it back to me, and then I kept kind of turning it around and trying to mix it and making a lot of rookie mistakes, mixing it. And Christoph said, "Well, let me take a look at it." So I handed it over to him, and we worked together and deconstructed it and put it back. He added some guitar, remixed all the interstitial parts, that was my problem. I had a lot of cool parts, and I didn't really understand at that time how to place them in the frequency spectrum of the song. And it's one of the things that I'm continuously learning from Christoph. Is if you do it right, you get a very thick but crisp response at the end of uh, the project, and you know it when you get it. And Christoph gets that very quickly now, and I'm hoping some of it's rubbing off on me. But from an overall mixing and mastering, uh, a good person to work with if he's going to mix your song
Mm,
has a whole palette of tools to work with to elevate your song from you and a guitar or a small group or an electronic background and you're trying to perform on top of it. It's good to have somebody who's been through a lot and knows what works and what doesn't work, and and is also constantly looking for new tools as they come out on the market and keeping his finger on that. And that's Christoph in a nutshell. So, Desert Water was really one of the very first projects he took over on the mixing side. And that's when I started relaxing about all the technical engineering stuff and getting more into the creative side. So it's been kind of a good way to get the balance
mm.
back between the technical and the creative because they are interlinked.
Well, Blue and Yellow, I believe, had a little bit of a life prior to this
Yeah,
winter.
it did. It did. It was part of the strategy of putting a single out that's going to eventually be on a bigger compilation to see what the feedback might be. And I got some feedback from people I knew. I didn't really push it that much when I put it out. And the whole concept, after my father died, a year after the Ukrainian war started,
Mm.
and so he died in 21. Ukraine war broke out in February 22, something like that. I hope I have my dates right, but if not, it doesn't matter.
So,
Um,
yeah.
but I dedicated the song. It was coming up on the 1 year anniversary of the beginning of the war. So I initially put the song out and dedicated it to the people of Ukraine. It's kind of a lament if you take it in that context. And it began as a lament watching my dad go through cancer over about a 10, 12 year period and finally passing. And I started writing that song when he was in the middle of that maintenance chemo. And he was strong as long as
Yeah.
he could be, and at the end he just went down really fast.
As I said earlier in the conversation, you've been great with sending me all your works in progress and calling me up and tell me what you're up to. And as you were putting together this release, you sent me a track you're working on with our great friend, Mr. Martin King.
Yeah.
Also been on this channel. Hello, Martin. Miss
Hi,
you.
Martin.
Um,
Hi, Martin.
he's on a track called After Hours, which is
Yes.
one of my favorites on the new EP. And that's
Yeah.
a word piece. So, kind of walk me through that because I know, Martin was another one of those people who, when the word go, and that
Yeah.
let's do something, and we've gone to London and we've played with Martin.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
This came up. I was working on kind of a noir jazz-esque sort of piece. Not trying to sound like jazz, but it's kind of in that corner, and like doing some intricate but swanky sort of saxophone sounds. I think I played the straight tenor on this one. And I had the whole idea of kind of a film noir, maybe a modern film noir sort of feel to it. And I started shopping it to a couple different people to do spoken word, and there were different issues that got in the way. And then, and all good. There are other people I collaborated with in the past. This is one that just didn't make it to them. It made it to Martin King. I sent it to him thinking, we'll see what happens. And I've heard him do lyrics and singing. I thought he'd be perfect voice for a spoken word. And that's what I felt this piece needed. It's kind of a very orchestral piece, or builds into a very orchestral sort of thing. And Martin just came up with the most amazing, dark um, story full of angst and veiled victory, I guess would be a good way to put it. You know, so just a wonderful collaborator, and I've got an idea for a film, a short, video for it. We're going to try to see if we can't make that work. So this project will be generating some video. We're working on one video for Break It Up already. It's in the final review right now, trying to make sure it makes sense. And when it's ready to go out, we'll put that out. And yeah, Martin King, when he came back with the poetry in itself was just amazing. And then I edited what I did to make sure everything that he did was fit. So I wasn't playing over something that he was saying. Um, it was important to do that because the spoken word was very powerful. I was just kind of like the guy in the background, the choir up on the mountain, while Martin was laying down to preach. You know what I mean? So it's one of my favorite tracks on the whole record, and I feel honored to have him on there to do that. And there may be more. I think that's an untapped talent from him, and it'd be a great way to get his poetry out. And he wrote that, I think, when he was having foot surgery, in between surgeries, or recovering from foot surgery. And you can feel the pain and the angst in him.
Well, I see that he's out and playing again. I know there was a Lady Boys gig either coming up or just recently took place out there in London. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I haven't been too connected with that yet. I'd love to go back and make something happen.
oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I'd love to go back too. I don't know if I'm going to do anything this year aside from seeing you and the other Martin at the very
Yeah,
least in November out in Chicago for the extremities thing. And
right. That's going to be a good show.
oh yeah, yeah,
We've got Steven Seabolt doing guitar for him, and
yeah. And I'll say again, I've said this elsewhere, but
the
Steven's
Air Royale.
the absolute best choice for that. You know, he's got the right sound,
Yeah,
and I know Steven is going to do the right thing by Geordie's legacy and really,
yeah, it's very important.
the sound. I mean, there's really no one else I think who can do it. Who's from the circle of people. You know.
Right. Who's playing bass?
I'm not sure. I heard um, some some rumblings that our favorite bass player from Berlin might be involved in some way.
Oh, yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, that
But,
would be cool. Yeah, our favorite bass player from Berlin has been quiet for too long, so that would be a wonderful debut for her to come back in.
indeed, I have been in touch with said bass player from Berlin. Um,
That is good. Tell said bass player from Berlin I said hello.
I certainly will say hello
I
to.
think I found some old material for us. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to bring it forward, but we're going to try.
Well, we have a thing, which I won't officially announce in full on this interview, but our project with our favorite bass player from Berlin, as well as Martin King and Joe Kopecki and Karen Righeimer and Ted Parsons and Jesse Hunt and Dirk Flanagan and probably some other people I can't recall right now. Troy,
Yeah.
that's coming out soon.
Yes.
And when I say soon, I mean by the summer.
Yeah. That's going to be the end of it. It took a lot of work by a lot of people to pull this together,
Yes.
and a couple of key people on the inside. You yourself, I know I've been right by your side on the whole thing. I'm very excited that it's going to be finally done. And yes, I'll say yes to another project with you, but I'm not going to let it go on for this long.
I think after this one, man, we're good for a bit because it just took, well, I mean, full marks to Martin Atkins because now I realize when you have more than like say five people in a band,
Oh yeah,
way. I mean, I don't know how he juggles 30, but this thing that we did, no, no, this is the
yeah. It's a lot of work, but hopefully for a good cause.
yes,
And,
yes,
it's never too late. And we'd rather put it out later and correct it with some remixes and take our time.
yeah. Well, that
Yeah.
was my
A lot of people did a lot of work on it.
yeah, and you especially did a lot of work on it, and I wanted to make sure we had the right people involved, and if that meant waiting a bit,
Right,
because I knew whenever those contributions would come in, it would be the absolute perfect contributions for what we were doing. So, yeah, and to my own fault as well. I slipped off for quite a bit as well during that time, and we had the COVID thing, and
you
uh,
wrote a book,
yeah, I mean, there was a lot kind of going on. So,
and
but for those who are watching, that's Rise, Reign, Revolt. That's what I've been hinting at on Facebook. There'll be a more formal official announcement soon, but that friggin' thing's finally finished. So yeah, so there's a lot going on in the future with our thing. There's a lot happening in the present with your EP. What does the rest of your 2025 look like?
working on new music for Ebner, and maybe doing a few things for Bile. We'll see what happens there. Um, but just looking for new opportunities. Maybe some stuff coming my way from Joy Thieves, not sure. There is some possible stuff coming my way from somebody I can't mention who lives somewhere I can't tell you about. Because it's not final yet, and doors always open. Um, you know, I did some work for this individual in the past, so we'll see what happens.
So we will, I'm sure our paths will cross again very soon.
Oh
Well,
yes,
we'll be seeing each other in Chicago later this year, and
right,
I'm sure there will be many other opportunities to come.
absolutely, always, Joel.
So come back
And
again
I'll keep harassing you with new stuff as it develops.
always.
I
Always.
love getting your opinion.
I appreciate that, and you know how to find me for sure.
Yes, yes, I do. I know where you live, and I know who you are. And what is the what's his name? Uh, kind of a dark singer from Australia. Goth.
The cave.
Nick Cave, yeah. We know who you are. We know where you live. There is no reason to forgive. It's
Well,
pretty dark.
leave it as we know where each other lives.
Yes, we do.
Take
Yeah,
care,
we do. Take care, my friend.